12th June 1941. RAF Curtain in Lindsey, Lincolnshire. The Morning Operations Board listed 74 RAF fighters lost during the previous month, most not destroyed in turning combat but abandoned during failed pursuit. Fighter Command's monthly summary recorded a pattern. Bf-109F aircraft could dive away faster than pursuing Spitfires could follow. The advantage came from fuel-injected engines that maintained power during negative G maneuvers, while RAF carburetted Merlin engines cut fuel flow the moment gravity reversed. Standing orders were explicit: do not follow a 109 into a steep dive. The restriction was less tactical doctrine than engineering admission. By August, official records would show revised maximum dive speeds, updated pilot notes, and film evidence of Spitfire Mk.Vs exceeding 500 miles per hour in combat descent. The archived shift appears gradual in documentation but abrupt in consequence. One pilot's unauthorized test became institutional practice within 8 weeks. The file begins with a medical clearance and ends with a tactical directive. June 1941. RAF Curtain in Lindsey, a sector station positioned between farmland and the flat horizon of eastern England. The morning operations log recorded 4 scheduled high-altitude standing patrols, all tasked with intercepting Luftwaffe reconnaissance aircraft crossing the North Sea. Flight Lieutenant James Eric Johnson, 25 years old, formally reported to No. 616 Squadron that morning. His medical authorization noted recovery from spinal surgery with restrictions, limited torso rotation, and a steel-reinforced brace worn beneath his May West vest. The squadron operated Supermarine Spitfire Mk.V fighters powered by Rolls-Royce Merlin 45 engines, praised for altitude performance yet compromised by float-type carburetors that cut fuel flow under negative G conditions. The morning briefing included a summary of May's operational results. 74 RAF fighters lost, most not destroyed in dogfights, but during failed pursuit of Bf-109F aircraft that dove away faster than Spitfires could follow. The German advantage stemmed from Daimler-Benz DB601N engines, with direct fuel injection, maintaining power even during abrupt downward acceleration. RAF instructions were unambiguous. Do not follow a 109 into a steep dive. Sudden loss of fuel pressure may cause full engine cutout. The rule reflected engineering limits, not tactical preference. Johnson's logbook entry for that date contains one line: machine superior, rules limiting. He had not yet challenged those limits, but awareness had formed. He flew his first patrol that afternoon, paired with Pilot Officer Alan Smith, a 21-year-old who kept a family photograph taped behind his gun sight. Both returned without contact, cockpit metal still warm from engine heat as ground crews refueled and rearmed in silence. Nothing in the hangar suggested change. No unexpected rules to be broken. But one fact pressed itself onto pilots: the enemy could escape at will, and the RAF had no counter except acceptance. For now, the war appeared governed by limits written in manuals, not by possibilities waiting beyond them. June 1941. Clear sky over East Anglia, high-pressure system extending from the Channel to the North Sea. 616 Squadron scrambled to intercept Bf-109Fs crossing the coastline near Cromer. At 24,000 feet, temperature registered minus 27 degrees Celsius, oxygen masks frosting at the edges. The engagement unfolded in familiar pattern, turning fight lasting less than 1 minute, followed by German fighters breaking away in steep, almost vertical dives. Johnson held firing position but faced the mechanical barrier. Negative G push meant immediate fuel starvation. The Spitfire's propeller would windmill until gravity restored flow, several seconds too late to maintain contact. On return, the squadron combat report listed, "No enemy damaged, no interception achieved." The Luftwaffe had used dive advantage to end the fight on its terms. Pilot Officer Smith, still pale from altitude cold, wrote one line in his personal log, "We watched them leave us. Could do nothing." Not frustration at the enemy, but at the aircraft's enforced limitations. Johnson's reaction remained internal. His flying gloves stayed damp long after landing, not from fear but from rising agitation. He later summarized the day in a private note, "Not defeated, only denied." The airfield continued routine operations. Armourers cleared feed trays, fitters checked boost pressures, 2 mechanics shared cigarette rations, but something subtle had shifted. What had been accepted as inevitable now appeared as a technical problem disguised as doctrine. Johnson wrote one final sentence before closing the page. "Someone must prove the machine wrong, or the rule will remain law. Not intention yet, only the first pressure behind an idea." For the first time, fault was placed not on pilots or enemy tactics, but on limits no one had dared to test. July 1941. Conditions over the Norfolk coastline remained clear, layered cirrus above 25,000 feet, ground visibility extending nearly 40 miles inland. At 09:12 hours, Blue Section of 616 Squadron began routine high-altitude patrol. No enemy aircraft sighted, but the event of record occurred during return flight. At 24,000 feet, Flight Lieutenant Johnson placed his Spitfire Mk.V into shallow negative G-push, just enough to unseat the carburetor float. Engine cut instantly, windmilling in silence against slipstream. Instead of levelling as regulations required, he held the nose down, allowing gravity to increase airspeed. At approximately 20,000 feet, positive G returned, fuel pressure restored, and the Merlin 45 came back to life without structural vibration. The aircraft passed 400 miles per hour indicated airspeed, then 430. The pilot's log shows no comment beyond single notation. Engine cut, recovered, dive stable. On landing, rather than filing mandatory mechanical report, Johnson requested only fuel, top off and rearm. An omission later noted in maintenance officer interviews. Sergeant Ron Hamer, assigned fitter, observed no stress rippling or rivet fatigue along wing routes. He recalled Johnson walking away from the aircraft, quote, "with the look of someone who knew something he shouldn't say yet. Human dimension remained quiet but present. Hands still trembling inside gloves as the aircraft sat cooling, heat rising off the Merlin's cowling in slow waves. The pilot had just disproven a standing assumption, not in theory but in flight. No senior officer informed. No reprimand issued. The event passed unrecorded except in one private flying log and a ground mechanic's memory. Yet it marked the first empirical breach of RAF doctrinal limits. The moment lasted only seconds, but created silent divide between written procedure and demonstrated reality. July 1941. RAF Duxford. A week after the unauthorized dive, Johnson was quietly selected for monitored test under the Air Fighting Development Unit. Official purpose described as evaluation of high-speed handling characteristics of the Spitfire Mk.V at altitude. Real subject, never printed, was whether the unofficial dive could be repeated under instrumented conditions. Weather: broken cumulus below 10,000 feet, clear air above, temperature minus 25 degrees Celsius at test height. Aircraft wings were chalk marked by ground crew to detect stress lines or torsional warping. Test Officer Flight Lieutenant Murmagen instructed Johnson to perform steep dive beginning at or above 22,000 feet, with throttle reduction only if structural vibration exceeded controllable levels. Recorded airspeed peaked at 480 miles per hour indicated far beyond the published 420 safety ceiling. Aileron response remained within controllable tolerance. No panel separation or structural buckling occurred. The Merlin engine cut under initial negative G as expected, then restarted at plus 1.5 G without mechanical complaint. Ground crewman leading aircraftman Peter Shand later recalled post-flight inspection. We expected to see stress lines radiating off the main spares. There were none. Film camera mounted in port wing route captured the descent, altimeter sweep, and airspeed indicator needle pushing past marked arc. That film was dispatched to Rolls-Royce design office at Derby the same evening. Logged not as combat evidence but as engine behaviour reference material. Human continuity remained evident. Johnson's medical back brace had cut into skin along his waist during descent, noted in infirmary record but never officially connected to the manoeuvre. Pilots observing the test reacted not with exhilaration but with silence, realizing a boundary they had relied upon for survival was now uncertain. No tactical directive changed. No public record acknowledged. The result, but evidence now existed on film that the Spitfire could follow a Messerschmitt into a dive and survive. Policy did not shift, but the data had. In war, data waits for no doctrine. July 1941. English Channel, Circus 58. A bomber escort operation targeting marshalling yards near Lille. 616 Squadron flew top cover at 26,000 feet, part of layered formation protecting Blenheim bombers. Combat began at 10:42 hours when Bf 109Fs from Jagdgeschwader 2 engaged from above and to starboard. Johnson sighted a 109 closing on a trailing Blenheim and initiated pursuit. The German pilot, Oberleutnant Heinz Bretnitz, executed standard escape, throttle forward, nose down, steep dive, toward cloud layer. RAF procedure would have ended the chase. Instead, Johnson followed. Fuel pressure faltered at initial negative G push, but gravity restored function as the aircraft crossed 20,000 feet. Airspeed reached estimated 460 miles per hour indicated, enough to close angle and fire short cannon burst from the Spitfire's Hispano Mk.V. The 109 rolled, vented glycol, and disappeared into overcast. Later Luftwaffe loss lists confirmed Bretnitz killed in action. When Johnson landed, squadron intelligence officer questioned engagement distance and closing speed. The pilot responded with single sentence, "I followed him down." Statement logged without comment, but unspoken tension in the room was clear. A pilot had ignored standing orders and succeeded. Human consequence entered immediately. Returning pilots shook not from adrenaline, but from cold and exertion. Johnson's right hand spasmed repeatedly in debriefing tent, physical response to prolonged high G strain compounded by spinal injury. A ground clerk offered him a cigarette. He declined, unable to keep lighter steady. Squadron mood shifted. Limits were no longer believed. They were negotiable. Statistical impact also marked shift. For the first time in 1941, a Spitfire Mk.V had shot down a Bf 109F after steep dive, a manoeuvre previously considered mechanically impossible. The mission remained costly. 2 RAF aircraft lost, 1 pilot killed, 1 captured. Combat advantage did not end casualties, but it reduced inevitability. Doctrine was no longer shield, it was now question. August 1941. Operation Ramrod 10, English Channel. 616 Squadron tasked with escorting bombers over Channel approaches. Air Ministry Film Unit had mounted 16mm gun camera to Johnson's aircraft, not to capture enemy kills, but to document airspeed, altimeter, and control response during combat descent. Modified camera fitted into left wing route, aligned not at gun sight, but at instrument panel. At 11:18 hours, enemy contact occurred. Bf-109F fighters from JG-26 slashed through formation from above, initiating rolling dive to escape after brief firing pass. Johnson followed lead German aircraft, repeating the now practiced -G maneuver, engine cut, and recovery. Camera recorded the moment. Fuel starvation occurred, and the moment pressure returned. It also captured airspeed needle passing 500 miles per hour indicated, first recorded instance of frontline RAF aircraft exceeding that threshold in combat. No kill confirmed in this descent, but the film achieved what no combat report ever could. Indisputable visual evidence that Spitfire Mk.V could dive as fast as Bf-109F without structural failure. Flight Officer Mark Lorry, camera technician, signed storage register that evening. Reel 7, Spitfire V dive behavior, instrument readout clear, film dispatched by motorcycle courier to RAF Fighter Command Headquarters at Stanmore, then forwarded to Air Ministry Technical Division. Human reaction was muted yet decisive. During debriefing, Johnson sat with flying boots unzipped, soaking wet with perspiration despite altitude cold. Physiological response to prolonged high-speed flight in constricting back brace. Nobody in the room congratulated him. Silence marked neither praise nor rebuke, but awareness that evidence now existed outside opinion. The dive had moved from rumour to report to proof. From that moment, it was no longer a question of whether the Spitfire could dive, but whether the RAF would admit it. August 1941, Fighter Command Headquarters, Stanmore. A technical addendum circulated to RAF group commanders. It did not mention any pilot's name. It did not reference film evidence. It simply stated that controlled steep dives may be employed in disengagement or pursuit, provided structural vibration is monitored and speeds do not exceed 480 IAS, except in emergency. Change initiated under authority of Air Vice Marshal Trafford Lee Mallory, whose staff had reviewed dive test files and Ramrod 10 film reel. The shift did not celebrate innovation, it bureaucratically absorbed it. Copies of updated pilots' notes for Spitfire Mk.V carried revised line in small type. Engine cut under -G may be restored with positive load. Do not assume unrecoverable condition. Behind this printed sentence lay career risk taken by single pilot, test repeated without permission, and evidence produced only because one camera operator had been instructed to ignore gun sight framing and film instruments instead. Human consequence remained. Johnson wrote to his mother that week, "I did not intend to change policy. I intended only not to let them go." His hand, injured during hard landing months earlier, cramped again while writing. Recurring physical reminder of body's limits in contrast with machines. Simultaneously, Rolls-Royce initiated development acceleration on small carburetor modification, brass restrictor plate designed by Beatrice Schilling. It would allow Merlin engines to maintain fuel flow during brief -G periods. The change, still months away from field use, would eventually remove dive restriction permanently. Tactics could change with single unsigned amendment. Machinery required redesign and time. September 1941. Circus, 100B, Lille. By late September, steep dive was no longer rumour. It was technique taught informally at dispersal tables, sketched on notepads, passed between pilots more often than printed in manuals, but the war did not ease with this improvement. Circus 100B, launched as deep penetration bomber escort mission over Lille, 616 Squadron flew high cover at 25,000 feet. Enemy interceptions were heavy. Johnson survived the mission. His wingman, Pilot Officer Alan Smith, did not return. Aircraft last seen trailing black smoke, descending through broken cloud, no parachute observed. When Squadron Clerk cleared Smith's locker, he found cigarette lighter and folded letter addressed to parents. Johnson was present when belongings were catalogued. That evening he wrote in logbook, "Alan gone. Dive helped me, not him." Success rate of engagements had improved. Casualty rhythm had not. 2 further RAF aircraft were lost that day. 1 pilot became prisoner of war. 1 killed. Squadron's monthly casualty report for September listed reduced kill-to-loss ratio, but same emotional ledger. Names replaced, aircraft reassigned, mission count unchanged. Dive maneuver saved seconds, not lives in guarantee. Even adaptation had limits. In war, improvement is not the end of loss, only the end of one kind of disadvantage. October 1941, RAF Coltishall, debriefing conference convened by Wing Commander Current, reviewing 3 months of Channel operations, steep dive maneuver now spoken of in formal language. Energy-based disengagement and pursuit. Personal risks once attached to its use replaced by briefing board diagrams and speed altitude tables. Johnson, now flight leader, sat among other pilots who had adopted the technique. Several carried lingering injuries, burst capillaries in eyes from repeated G-loading, strained shoulder muscles from rapid stick inputs, chronic fatigue from flying multiple sorties per week. Physical cost remained evident, even as tactical understanding matured. Operational data now confirmed the shift. BF 109F escape rate by dive had fallen from 63% in June to 22% by late September. Spitfire Mk.V pursuit kill ratio had increased by 14% along Channel front. Engine failures during dives dropped sharply among pilots trained in controlled G restoration, not those relying on luck. But most striking metric remained unchanged. Pilot mortality rate. Gains in maneuverability did not prevent exhaustion, accidents, misjudged brake turns, flak bursts that shredded control surfaces without warning. Johnson was promoted soon after, yet his tone remained restrained. His final logbook line for October 1941 read, "The machine changed. We adapted. The dead remained as they were." That line marks human boundary of innovation in war. Knowledge advances faster than survival can follow. No aircraft, however improved, could change the fact that every new tactic was paid for twice, once in discovery and once in lives that did not benefit from it. The 1941 dive trials did not begin as sanctioned research program. They began with a pilot irritated by rule that preserved aircraft but abandoned initiative. Through repetition, documentation, film evidence, and eventual command acknowledgement, the Spitfire Mk.V emerged not as redesigned machine, but as reinterpreted one. Technical shift from forbidden dive to authorized tactic altered RAF air combat balance over Channel, but did not end attrition cycle that defined that phase of air war. For every mechanical improvement, there remained weather, fatigue, ammunition shortages, failed radio calls, and randomness of battle damage. Deeper lesson recorded in fighter command archives is not about one innovation, but about institutional delay between what pilots learn and what headquarters confirms. Doctrine changes slowly. Survival requires faster adaptation. By early 1942, carburetor modification known as Miss Schilling's orifice was fitted to frontline Spitfires, permanently resolving negative G cutout that had defined a year of tactical limitation. By then, dozens of pilots had been lost in engagements where dive might have mattered but was not yet permitted. The war did not reward discovery, it only recorded it. In this episode of the Air War, The archive shows that victory was not sudden breakthrough, but slow replacement of belief with evidence, paid for in sorties, test flights, and names etched into squadron rolls.